When you're a child, the world is your playground. It was the first official day of summer, and I just made a pact with my closest friends, Josh, Ryan, and Mikey. We paused a game of Super Smash Bros. To agree in unison that we had to live up every single day, rain or shine, because junior high awaited us in the fall. Yeah, we literally had a fear of losing each other, as a club we called it, because the thought of combining two elementary schools into a new building scared the crap out of us. Little did we know at the time what high school or even college would present. To have a young mind again. We sealed this pact with a four-way special club handshake, and the first adventure was about to begin. We turned off the N64, threw out our Lunchables, and all sprinted outside of Josh's house. His house was at the very end of a dead-end street, so we each already knew which direction to set off in. All four of us grabbed our bikes and quickly hopped on to ride together. I called for a spontaneous bike race to the next street sign, about a half-mile down the road, and everyone joined in. I won, of course, since I gave myself a bit of a head start in the beginning. I was nearly beat by Ryan though, who for his birthday had just received the newest and fastest bike a kid our age heard about. My old beat-down BMX bike stood no chance in a fair race, but I would never admit it. We biked around for hours, stopping at convenience stores for snacks and going from part to part just playing around. Even though literally nothing special occurred, it was still an amazing day. My friends and I never had big ideas of where we were going and what we were going to do. But back then at least, when you were with your best friends, plans didn't matter. They just happened. It was just before dusk and we were heading back to Josh's house. The pace was incredibly slow since we had biked around for 6 hours with a minimal rest. We turned onto the street when Mikey's Game Boy Color fell out of his pocket. Why he didn't leave it at the house earlier, I did not know. So we all stopped with him as he went to retrieve it, and that gave me a moment to rest my legs for a bit. I looked around the calm and content street, only to notice a creepy woody lot that no kid ever went into. The lot had been up for sale for quite some time, but no one ever bought it. That gave reason for all the neighborhood kids to speculate about whether or not it's haunted. There was a rumor that beyond the lot, as it backed up into a forest, that there was an abandoned clubhouse. And then I thought, wait, we could take over that clubhouse. We should be the first kids to ever enter the lot. I pitched the idea to my friends who were all split on it. Ryan really wanted to go, Josh really didn't want to go, and Mikey was at the point of crying because he had declared his Game Boy Color broken. I eventually convinced all of them that we should be the first kids brave enough to enter the lot, and since we had our own club, taking over the clubhouse would be pretty epic. We went over to it, made sure that no neighbors were watching, and then sprinted our bikes into the woods. We hid them on the side and took our first steps into the dark and ominous lot. Even though the sun had not officially set yet, the woods were nearly pitch black. No one had flashlights, but our eyes eventually adjusted. We got to the very end of the lot, and we knew that because of a broken down, rusty fence. We looked past it into what was a thicker and more dense version of the woods on this lot. Still, no one backed out, so we hopped the fence, going forward. We walked for a good mile before finding the clubhouse, but disappointment set in as we saw it was broken down to the point that the only fix was completely rebuilding it. Great, so much for that. We almost began to go back when Ryan noticed something in front of us. There was a dim fire lit in the distance and voices were softly heard. I put my finger to my mouth to motion silence, and we went to sneak up closer. We saw nothing as we snuck up, staying hidden behind the bushes, but we began to hear the voices more vividly. They were chants and made no sense to us. It was in English. I saw 3 figures with all black clothing sitting on individual benches around a fire. There was a small, broken-down tool shed near the fire pit. It was painted bright pink, with hippie flowers and peace signs drawn on it. There was writing as well, but I couldn't make it out. It was an odd image to see such dark characters next to a bright shed, but this situation was already weird enough. I sat back down as the chanting continued with the same words over and over again. It sounded like, Totus intero nasago. I looked at my friends who were obviously terrified of what we were both seeing and hearing. I attempted to think of a way out, but then the chanting stopped. My heart dropped as I peeked over the bush again. I saw the figures all leaving in the opposite direction from where we came, going to deeper into the woods. Once the figures were officially gone, all four of us stood up terrified. Still whispering, Josh pleaded that all of us sprint back the way that we came. Ryan agreed that we should, but countered that first we should look inside of the tool shed. Originally, I was all for leaving immediately, but I had forgot about the shed. Mikey stood silent. The kid never had an opinion. Reluctantly, Josh agreed, so we all snuck past the still burning fire to go by the shed. I can now read the writing that was on it, and it said, "The tool shed of love." We got around to the front of the shed, and Ryan was at first to the door. He turned around and whispered that it was shut with a master lock. However, Mikey finally spoke and pointed out that everything was so old that it could probably be broken into. After kicking it 3 times, the lock fell off with the front part of the latch, and the door slightly opened on its own, and we knew now that we could enter the shed. I was the first to the door, having been the one to kick it open when I got a whiff of the horrible odor. I quickly plugged my nose, not thinking much of it, when I swung the door wide open. We all screamed like girls at what we saw. Inside the shed were 7 torn-up rabbits, hanging from the ceiling on fishing line. Behind them on shelves were squirrels and chipmunks in similar ways, and around that rolled burnt candles everywhere, along with a fake human skull. We continued to scream as we turned to run back, but just as we did in the distance, we saw the 3 figures returning. They saw us as well, pointed and screaming while beginning to run. I screamed even louder as I sprinted away faster than I ever had before in my life. I got in front of all my friends and did not look back for about 30 seconds. I glanced back to see that all the guys were still with me, and the 3 figures had stopped chasing us. That, however, did not derail my pace as I continued to sprint at full speed. We finally got to where we had stashed our bikes and quickly left the lot. We got back to Josh's house and he immediately, as kids that age tend to do, told his parents what we had just saw and found. They wound up calling the town police just to check it out, and the cops did. A couple of hours later, an officer showed up to the house. We were in Josh's bedroom, but all stayed quiet and huddled around the door to listen as the cop was let in. He told the parents that they found everything that we said was there, but no people. He stated that they have seen similar events in those woods and believe it was the work of a local cult. He urged them that nobody on the street should be afraid, but everyone should avoid entering that lot and forest. We then heard the cop asking where us kids were, so we quickly left the door and pretended to be doing something else. I believe that I may have held a book upside down briefly if I do remember correctly. The cop knocked on the door and we let him in, and he went on to explain to us that the people who are not so nice hang out in those woods and that we should never enter there again. He asked us if we understood and we all said yes. He then shook our hands and then laughed. We got the exact same talk moments later from Josh's parents, and normally I would have been annoyed, but clearly this was a different type of situation. Even though we were as rebellious as the next kid was, neither of us ever wanted to go back into that lot or forest. About a year after this all had happened, the lot was purchased by a contractor. Today, a giant house sits there. I wonder if the occupants know what occurred there decades prior. It was early in 2015, and I had to go to a party organized by one of my classmates who lived in a rural town. During the party, I did the usual, smoked a little bit and drank some schnapps that I had made with pears. My friends seemed to enjoy it quite a lot, so we were all pretty wasted. Around 3 a.m., a lot of people began to go to sleep in tents, and I didn't have one and nobody wanted to share it with me. So after some time, I decided to go back to my place, which was quite far. It was like an hour-and-a-half walk. So I started walking in for 15 minutes in the dark of an unfrequented country road with a cool wind and a nice temperature. You know that kind of moment where you're just chilling after a party and you're enjoying the walk? It was like that. But soon a car came along. It was red and I could see it from a decent distance away despite the darkness around me. Confident like a teenager can be while a little bit wasted, I continued to move forward. Nevertheless, the drivers saw me and they sped up to reach me. Within a few seconds, 2 guys got out of the red car and began to attack me. I did my best fighting back, kicking one in the head and pushing the other one in a small ditch that ran along the road. But then the first one pushed me into it too, and we continued to fight for a few minutes. At that time, I had been practicing martial arts for 3 years, but I had dropped it when I got into high school. With the adrenaline that I felt in that situation, I didn't feel any pain from their attacks, so I was able to fight back pretty well, and there was no clear winner. God, I wish I hadn't enjoyed it. I wish I would have ran as soon as the car pulled over. I wish that I wasn't so reckless, cocky, and stupid at the time. After several minutes, another guy opened the right back door of the red car and came out. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, but my attention was redirected to the 2 men at hand. This third guy approached and he pulled out a gun, aiming it at me, with a strange hand like his skin had some white stains on it. When I saw it, everything stopped around me and my ears began to be filled with ultrasounds covering the words of these guys. Next thing I know, one of the first 2 guys grabbed my arms and locked it behind my back, while the second one began to throw more punches. He hit me mostly in the face because he was mad that I hadn't surrendered at first. The third one took my bag and went to look what was in it. And then after taking out a spare t-shirt and some personal stuff, he yelled and they stopped beating me up. Indeed, they were still locking me out and put my head on the ground, and the third one frisked my pockets and took my phone. He asked me, "Do you have any drugs on you? Weed, the good stuff?" I answered that I did, but I finished it all at the party where I was before, and he told the 2 guys to let me go. While I was getting up, the guys were discussing about me and what to do next. Suddenly, the third one looked at me and asked, "So, where's this party you were talking about, Joseph?" I didn't have any identity papers or a wallet on me, and it was literally impossible that he discovered my name with the stuff that he stole in my bag. I didn't even write my name on the label of my t-shirt. I already felt defeated and I was really scared. But at this moment, I really began to become a lunatic. I didn't answer because I couldn't contain my emotions about this. He asked me again, but I was terrified. I couldn't stare back at him, even if I was a pretty sick kid at these times. I had never been in a worse situation than this. As I looked at the ground, he saw my shoes and told me, "A nice Air Maxes, give them to me." I didn't react again, so he approached and stooped to take it, as he saw that I couldn't move a muscle. But this time, I was clearly going to make a move, and that was the moment to reverse the odds. As he stooped, I waited and then I hit him violently in the face with my knee, and I started to run faster than ever, dodging his mates. Unfortunately, I left my stuff behind, but I was too scared to go back, and I didn't look back fearing that they may be pursuing me. But all I saw were these 3 guys staring at me, the third one laughing really loudly and insulting me from where I stood. Now to be clear, I don't live in a country where there's any gun control. There's a lot of control, but a lot of people can still get them through other means. That wasn't the first time that I saw one. I had gotten the opportunity to use some a few times with my grandfather, so I did know the consequences and I didn't underestimate the risks. Nevertheless, the story doesn't end here, awfully. After fleeing in the fields, I got back to the party and some of the remaining people still awake helped me out. I wasn't talking or answering any questions. I did say that 2 guys beat me up, but I was too scared to tell about the 3rd one because he had a gun, but above all, he knew my name. After a few traumatic hours, I called my mom with the phone of the girl who took care of me, and she went to the place of the party to take me back home. I didn't tell her the truth, even if I trusted her more than anyone I knew, that she was gonna freak out still. And that wasn't a really good period since I already had a bad experience with the police and that she was really exasperated by me. Anyway, she still took me to the police station and I told them the same thing, and I clearly saw some of the officers laughing at me. After a week, I decided to go back to a party that was not really far from home, like a 15-minute walk. I realized that every time I heard a car, I tried to hide to avoid it. Sometimes when a car stopped and stood on place, I preferred to make a detour. These crazy trauma reflexes lasted 2 years. 2 years fearing that I may meet this man again. As I told earlier, I filed a complaint at the police station, but there were clearly no hope to find them. Until they called me back and it was September 2017. I drove to the station and I'd gotten a license in the meantime. That's better than walking about 2 hours during night, as you can relate to now. And they set me up in a room. They asked me about what had happened 2 years before, and I told them the same story that I told everyone, and they showed me a few pictures. They were kind of like mugshots, and I couldn't tell if I recognized them because their faces were masked up at the time. But then I had a strange vibe with one of the pictures. One had strange white stains. While thinking and trying to remember the scene, which I had mostly forgotten at that point. Like I could tell what happened, but I couldn't remember the experience of the situation entirely. Like I had dug it up in the ground and I would never think about it again. I clearly saw the moment of the arrival of this guy, and that his hand had caught my attention when he had pulled the gun out. Even if I didn't tell the truth before, I wanted to know what they found to ask to come up here, so I told them that this guy did seem familiar, and I asked if he was the right one. After this recognition, the police officers seemed to be a little uncomfortable. One got out of the room and the others stood in silence. After a few seconds, he came back with a file and, without showing it, he began to leaf through it and started talking. That moment had really chilled my blood. Ube Santana is suspected for the case of 2 homicides. 2 bodies were found in a private forest by a random individual. The 2 victims were already known by the law enforcement units, and their ties to the Ube Santana makes them the prime suspect. The police officers carried out a search after obtaining the authorization of the prosecutor. Bullet cartridges and a small quantity of drugs were found, but the apartment seems to have been emptied before the visit. I couldn't believe it. This was going too far for me. I asked to see some of the photos from the files, saying that it would likely help them. I wasn't sure what they could show me due to some things being classified, but they were really looking to seek any advice that they could get. They showed me the photos of the house search and it seemed pretty gross. Mold and stuff, and it really looked like a crackhead spot. As I was looking at the pictures, I saw something that I didn't want to see. They had taken a picture of the drugs that they had found, and the first picture shows the hand of a police officer, filled with the drugs above a bag. A blue bag. A blue Herschel bag. Yeah, that's messed up. I couldn't contain myself and told them that it was probably my bag in the picture. Those backpacks weren't common in my country, so I figured it was worth it to tell it to the police. They nodded and took down some notes, and no complaint filing or anything. They just noted some stuff and they thanked me. Now in 2021, I still don't know what happened after this, and I didn't see anything about a man getting arrested in the local papers nor on television. I still don't know how the man got my name. Even with time, I began to believe that I may have written into my bag in case I lost it, but that seems too unlikely for someone as irresponsible as me. But I'm proud to say that I recovered well and that I put this stuff behind me. I had a hard time to walk alone again during night for a few years, but now it's okay. I don't fear it anymore to go out, but I am really careful when I do. If you don't have the choice and need to go home, run as soon as a car is heading towards you.